I've been interviewing for product management position in the US for the last 7 years. I passed many interviews, but I failed many more. In fact, I failed hundreds of interviews. I'm always working to figure out why I didn't succeed in each round. What should I improve next time to pass? Unfortunately, companies are less likely to provide feedback and give us a real reason why you failed. In today's episode, I'm going to talk to the hiring manager, product director, and chief product officer to answer this question. Why did I fail? Stay tuned. I'm Anna Naumova, Principal Product Manager at Oxygen and ex-Product Manager at Apple, career coach, and the host of this channel called Prodcast, where I interview my guests about product management, job search, and immigration to the US. If you need support with your resume, LinkedIn profile, or career transition in tech, please visit my website, annanaumova.com, for more information. All right, my guest today, Bosky Mukherjee, founder of PM Dojo, where she leads the product accelerator and coaching programs. Also, she's a product leader and ex-product manager at Atlassian and other cool companies. Moreover, she's a startup advisor and speaker. Welcome, Bosky, and thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Anna, for having me. Lovely, lovely Saturday morning. I am doing very well. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm really, really good. So can you give me a brief introduction about yourself and what are you doing right now?
Absolutely. So I am doing a lot of things. I've always done a lot of things at the same time. A little bit about myself. I've been in the tech industry and the product world before product management was an established field. So roughly a little over 20 years. So it's been a long time. Feels like dinosaur, but I've seen the field evolve. I've seen enormous changes and, every time there's been a shift in the market, how this field kind of changes, what the expectations are. I started my career as a tech support engineer back in the day. I immigrated to the US as a student, so F1 visa, took the first role that I was able to kind of get and also pay my bills and make sure that my status was all good. And so, I joined a very small startup, 5-person. And within 2 months, they were trying to get something out in the market and they were building a product. So even before product management was formalized, companies were still building products and solutions, right? I consider myself fortunate that I was able to ride that wave. And that was my first entry into what it feels like to be a product manager, even though we didn't call these roles product management back in the day. But I also happened to learn and unlearn this field in the absence of, I think, the books or the podcasts and, courses and formulas and frameworks. And it was very hard, but I am glad that I learned it that way because I think it helped me really broaden that perspective. Over the course of my career, I've done design, I've done research in addition to product management. I got involved in mergers and acquisitions, I've done growth. I've led and hired and built product teams from ground up, from PMs to designers to researchers, data scientists. I hire PMs, I advise a lot of companies. Currently, yes, I'm building and growing PM Dojo. I also started startup Unleash Her to specifically help women bootstrap founders to go all the way from idea to monetization without VC funding, which is so important in this market, especially as VC money is kind of dying. And as women, we tend to get, fraction of that pool anyway. Writing a book that is going to weave real stories of product people navigating career and life. What else? I'm a mom and we are to a 9-year-old and we are wrapping our life here in Canada and kind of heading down south in the US this month. I can't believe it's this month. Until a few days ago, it was next month. And today it's this month.
This month, December. Yeah, that's cool. And I'm also a mom of 9. Yeah.
you go.
That's cool. I have a daughter. Do you have son or daughter?
I have a son. I have a son. I'm the only woman in my family, like our family of four. My dog is a boy.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, yeah, 9-year-old, and the dog is 4-year-old. So a human kid and a fur kid.
That's cool. That's cool. So yeah, I'm glad you finally get to the US soon. And yeah, and I'm impressed of your experience, like being in product manager for many years. You're like really like a dinosaur and doing a lot of stuff like hiring PMs, advising the company, and we'll definitely talk about it during this interview. So let's switch to your advising. You mentioned that you're advising companies. So what are the most significant challenges they face in the current job markets related to product management? Yeah,
Absolutely. And we are going to be answering it from two angles, the companies and the candidates, or you want a perspective for the
yeah, so far let's talk about companies, because as I see what's going on in the market, there are a lot of candidates in the market. Is it still challenging for companies to hire PM? Why do they need advisor? Yeah, tell me about that.
Absolutely. So I advise a lot of startups, growth stage companies, mature companies, not just on hiring PMs, but actually operationalizing what product management should look like. Product management feels and looks very different from one company to another. Depending on what kind of problems you're trying to solve, the flavor of product management looks different, right? So if you're trying to sunset a product, or if you're trying to launch a 0 to 1, or if you're a mature company and you have 5-6 different products and you want to kind of lead that and figure out what product management looks like at that point. If you're a company that hasn't had traction and hasn't had a product market fit, and you want to now think about how to achieve that, product management looks very different. And then product management looks very different once you achieve a PMF and you want to grow and scale. And depending on those type of broader business problems, what do you need in terms of how product management is done and how the PMs in those companies need to skill up and level up changes. So that's where I come in. My whole purpose is that I go in with the intention of firing myself in a few months so that those teams can be functional without me. And that's my whole purpose. That's how I've even worked in companies as an employee. When
I like this goal, fire myself.
Fire myself. Yes.
That's like the greatest achievement, like to set up all processes to fire myself so that the company and the team do not need me
Absolutely.
anymore. Yeah?
Processes, people, skills, everything, because product management is also so much more than just processes, right? Processes is only one part, right? There is, for me, when I think about product management, I consider it as a craft, right? And you have to continue to keep on honing it, because what works yesterday is not going to work tomorrow. As humans, we are kind of strange species. And a lot of, if you want to be a great product manager, I think you have to really master those interpersonal skills in addition to the hard skills. So that's what I do when I'm advising a lot of different companies. Now, looking back to your question around why is it hard, or how does the market impact the hiring, the skilling up?
Yeah. What's going on in the hiring landscape for the companies? What's going on from the company's perspective?
Absolutely. So, there are still problems that companies are facing. And the nature of the problems in a lot of different companies have changed drastically in the last 1 year, right? Companies are having to rethink, not just from, what should be the next feature. They're having to rethink their product offering. Many companies are having to rethink their business model. Many companies are having to rethink, what does let's say the product structure look like? Do we need to reorganize so that we're making faster decisions? Do we have the luxury of doing like 3-month research projects? How can we go to the market fast? Disruption is everywhere. And that's evident. We've seen something like this before as well in the last many years. Every time there were these market, dynamics that happened, whether it was the housing bubble, the financial crisis, we've seen these changes happen. And so they are having to kind of assess what kind of product management do we need to bring? I think that has been one big shift. So I think even 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, if there was a PM with very strong tactical skills, it was good enough. But now, as companies, like many companies are trying to flatten their organization. So less of those hyper specialized roles. And so when you think about product management, you are kind of trying to look not for a unicorn who can do everything, but a PM who has something that I've always talked about called full stack skills and full stack experience. What that means is not just enough on just working with engineering to get it done. It's not enough to just do, requirements and PRDs and user stories. You have to have a pretty good sense of something called design acumen. What does the design and the experience look like? Doesn't mean you have to become a designer, but in order to collaborate with a designer, as an example, it's not enough to just think about how can I do a handoff? How can I add a comment, in the design artifacts? But it's more about how can I participate? How can I know what does good design look like? How can I give good feedback? How can I really work with my designer right up front in the problem discovery to figure out, what does that experience look like and how might we decompose it so that we can come up with maybe something that we can get to the market faster, right? So again, design acumen, there's so much to unpack there, but I'm just kind of giving a very high level overview. Commercial acumen is huge. I mean, a lot of times I think PMs were so focused on just shipping and just getting something out and maybe measuring, what was the usage and engagement and things like that. But at the end of the day, as a PM, you're really, really responsible. Like you have to bring value to the business. And that value has to come in some sort of business impact, right? And so how do you optimize that? Do you understand the different levers? What makes the business viable? Even though it might be the best feature based on all of the data, but is it the right thing at the business at this time to be doing? How do you have those type of conversations with the higher ups? How do you speak in that language? Because think about it. All of your business stakeholders, they haven't gone and done a product management certificate. So if you're going to be speaking in a PM language, that's not going to gel with there. So I think really kind of learning that storytelling, data acumen skills, how do you influence up, and then 0 to 1 skills, which is becoming really important. So I think when you're thinking about all of this, hiring is becoming difficult. You also post a job and within a few minutes, within a couple hours, you end up getting 1,000+ applications. So of course, sieving through that is becoming tough because even the hiring teams and the recruiting teams are now short-staffed. You end up getting lots of DMs and messages from the candidates, rightfully so. I've done it as a candidate myself. But your priority as a recruiter or a hiring manager is to move through the already accepted applications, which is huge. Like who has the time to go over 1,000+ candidates? And then figuring out how to interview, because the standard interview questions are not enough. Candidates are getting smarter right now. And so they ask tough questions too. I always coach, when I'm coaching PMs, I always tell them, make sure you're interviewing the company as well. And then figuring out, what is the right number of interviews that you need to do in order to make sure that at least you as a company, you're comfortable making the right decision. And then how do you onboard them really quickly? Because we all know as a PM, it takes months to kind of start feeling comfortable, right? Your onboarding is very, very challenging and stuff is changing and you have to adapt. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that kind of gives a little bit of an example. When I look at the job prospects and the hiring prospects, I see a lot of jobs right now. I see a lot of jobs that haven't even been published, and I'm being contacted by my peers in the industry who are hiring in other companies. And, I will share them in PM Dojo community as well. On a weekly basis, I'm sharing 40 to 50 jobs that have been posted less than 24 hours. And so there is a lot of jobs out there, rightfully so, because, you want to get that process out before you have to go through the approval process next year. You might lose the requisition as a hiring manager. So lots of jobs out there. There are interviews happening in my community in PM Dojo as well. Many folks are, interviewing with multiple companies. it is there. It's not as what it used to be 2 years ago, but I wouldn't say that it's all doom and gloom right now.
And we're going to talk how we can overcome it as a product managers. But before we switch to this topic, I really want to just clarify what you said before. It was super insightful, and I wrote down a lot of points. So do you understand correctly that because of this recession and this situation in the market, the company became flooded, and the product managers actually became with broader responsibilities? Right? So I just don't need to do one specific stuff. I really well. I need to do well a lot of other stuff. Yeah. And that's super, it's super great insight, to understand how to approach the hiring process, how to show off, how to show your achievements. Also, I really like your point about the number of applications, that a lot of application is not actually published, right? They go through the networking, they go through some communities, whatever. So to find these jobs, you don't need to go to LinkedIn and be one out of thousands of applicants. You need to be part of the community to do that, to be one of 100 at least. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're not if you're not an early applicant, just think about it, right? You're reducing your chances considerably because when you're shortlisting folks to interview, it's very rare to look beyond 50. It's very rare to look beyond 20, 30 applicants, right? And so you're going to typically shortlist 8 to 10, again, depending on the size of the company and, what is the scope of the role and the depth of the role and things like that. So you won't even look anyone beyond 100. And so, back in the day, even 3-4 years ago, it was okay to bookmark all of these different jobs and say, okay, on the weekend, I'm going to apply. Now, by the time, if you do that, you've just lost your chance. It's a missed opportunity. And I think this is where, as a candidate, it can feel like you're spinning your wheel and, candidates get burnt out. I almost passed out in one of my interviews a few years ago because I was so burnt out from this whole job search process, which can take months and months and months. It's like a marathon, right? Especially in PM. And so I think it's really important to figure out what are some of those smarter strategic ways that, you're not getting burnt out, but at the same time, you're increasing your chances for landing a role and doing well once you're hired, right?
And let's talk about it. So since you are interviewing and hiring right now, which are the most common mistakes product manager make during their job search process? I understand one is being one out of 1,000 applicants and apply on LinkedIn. That's probably the mistake number one.
Yes.
And send a lot of DMs. That's not working properly.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Sending a DM straight away with a resume. No.
Okay.
So I think if you want to think about a job search, think about it from, I think, a process, right? It's a funnel, right? You apply for jobs, you search for jobs, you apply for jobs, and then the funnel decreases. The next step is, the first round, typically recruiter round. If it's a larger, mid-size, larger company, smaller, you might straight away be interviewing with a hiring manager. And then you have a few other rounds. And at each step, the funnel just keeps on decreasing, right? And then, of course, you get an offer. And hopefully multiple, right? I see this in PM Dojo. We are having people who are getting multiple offers, even in this market. So it is possible. Yes, it's not happening as rampant as it used to be 2 years ago, but I definitely see quite a few folks from PM Dojo who are getting multiple. But the thing is that it is decreasing. So the first step is to actually figure out where in the process are you encountering a problem, right? It's like a PM. You have to understand the problem, and you have to define that problem and frame that problem really correctly. And then you have to figure out how to solve. A lot of times what happens from a candidate standpoint that I'm seeing is that, we just get into this rut of okay, I need to reword my resume. I need to reword my resume. But if you think about it, maybe you're getting through and you're getting your callbacks, but the problem is in the interview. Then you have to ask yourself, well, which part of the interview process am I is blocking me. Because if it's the first round, then maybe I have these few things done I need to work on those other things. So I think about job search, your career like a PM, and then figure out which part of the process is the problem. And then you double down there. So that is that one thing, right? Like if you don't identify where the problem is, you're going to end up wasting so much of your time trying to solve the wrong thing. So that's mistake number one for me. I think the mistake number two is, let's now talk about resume just in general at a very, very high level. Resume is an important part of the process, right? You have to get into the system for you to be considered as one of the potential candidates that the company is interviewing. But it is only one very small part of your total job search. The first time when someone is looking at your resume, they are looking to make a decision of whether they want to get you in for the first round of interview or not. And they're typically scanning for maybe 20, 30 seconds. And we know, from psychology data is that you have 30 seconds to make an impression. Like we know that, whether even if you're presenting at work, whether you're having a conversation, whether you're introducing yourself, 30 seconds is what most humans on average, we have that attention span. And so it is less about putting those keywords and stuffing those keywords, but it is more so about communicating that business impact. So 8 out of 10 resumes that I see right now don't have business impact, right? They have tasks, they have responsibilities. It looks like another version of a job description to me, right? And so then it doesn't tell me anything. And it's very easy to kind of pass that resume off, right? So please don't spend 90% of your time on resume, right? Don't try to make it perfect. So that's one. I think number two mistake that I typically see is the resume is full of jargon and theoretical PM concepts. Like I've done a roadmap, and I can challenge any person out here that if I were to give you the name of any company in this world, you can spin up a roadmap in 30 minutes. That's easy. But at the end of the day, what happened with the roadmap? What didn't happen? How did you go about? I think how do you communicate that is just missing, not only in resume, but also when you talk during your interview. So next comes the interviewing. And again, it's very important to understand what type, what are the rubrics that the interviewer is using at each stage, right? If it's a behavioral round, they're not just looking to see, well, do you know the STAR method? And are you able to hit each of the methods? They're really trying to gauge, what is it going to be like working with you? If you have fallen into some crazy situation, how do you think and how do you work? Is this going to work with us? Is this how it's going to work with the team? Are you going to be someone who is going to cause, are you going to instill calm? Are you going to cause, what is it working with you? How do you think? How do you work? How do you get past challenging situations? Because as a PM, we need resilience. So it's very important to understand, what is the bigger meaning behind behavioral rounds, design rounds, execution rounds, strategy rounds, and then really try to answer those questions so that you're hitting it. So the next biggest mistake that I see is that candidates will come in the interviews, and as soon as the question is asked, they may ask clarifying questions, because we all know we have to ask clarifying questions, but immediately they start filling in the blanks on a framework to answer that question. So the depth of thinking is missing, unfortunately, right? So superficial thinking becomes very, very common. And I know that, we're all kind of nervous. It's a nerve-wracking experience for a candidate to be, in an interview. I've been there, numerous times for years as a candidate at different levels. And it's very crazy. But if we are not able to show that clarity of thinking, and if you're not able to show that depth of thinking, if you're not able to show the level of decision making, if you're not able to show the growth in our career as a PM, as we rose up the ranks, or if someone who's trying to transition, then it kind of misses the point, right? Because right now, you're not just competing against other PMs or other people who are trying to get the role, you're also competing against ChatGPT. A lot of times, if your answers sound like ChatGPT, then as a hiring manager, they're going to ask, right? Like, why am I looking to hire if I can get these answers from ChatGPT? That's just me, I think, taking it a little bit too far, but I've heard this from hiring managers. And I think one of the biggest pet peeves of hiring managers, what I hear every single time, is that it's very easy to talk about product management theoretically. It's whole another game to talk about it from an actual, like, I have done this, I've done these kind of problems, and then answer it from that perspective. So I'll pause there because there are tons of mistakes, but I think these are the ones that I'm constantly seeing, right? Not closing the loop would be another one. So how do you close the loop? How do you make sure when you're answering your questions, the other
What do you
person
mean
is
by closing the loop? What do you mean?
So let's say a question is asked in an interview, right? A lot of times, as a candidate, I've done that too. We start rattling the answer. And then we just pause. And then either the interviewer will ask follow-up questions, but it isn't a conversation happening back and forth, back and forth. So that's one. But I think even after the interview, how do you close the loop back with the person who interviewed you? Whether it's just like, either an old school way of sending a thank you note. I know this is an old school. You don't have to, especially if you're interviewing. You're so busy interviewing. We don't have time as candidates. I totally get it. But I think, if you really care I think for a particular role or for a particular company, I think it helps to kind of go a little bit above and beyond. You don't have to do this for all, because especially if you're interviewing for 100+ roles. For me, I'm a little old school in this, and I've seen how those relationships over 2 decades have helped me even to this day, where maybe but that relationship got built, at least the seed was sown, even if it was a no. And over the course of maybe months or years, I actually ended up interviewing with the same person, maybe same company, different company. The tech industry is really small. So I've done that, I also don't apply for, hundreds of different jobs at the same time. I used to do that. Later on in my career, I stopped doing that. This is what I coach people. Like, you have to be really smart. So apply for a handful, but do it really well and close that loop, right? Like, let them know. And if it doesn't work out, it's fine, but at least sow that seed. So that's how you can kind of build your relationship jar, right? Relationship is the true currency. I truly, truly believe it. And it has been just mind-blowing to see how those relationships have helped me in my own career and how they help so many different folks. So
that was super helpful. Yeah, thank you so much. I like your idea to approach job search as a product, build the funnel and identify which step of the funnel this problem occurs. Maybe it's in a resume stage when you apply for multiple jobs and don't have a lot of response from recruiters. Maybe it's in the second round, third rounds, etc. Just like analyze that and try to improve that. I also like your suggestion that about ChatGPT, be smarter than ChatGPT. I think it's super helpful because yes, you're competing not just against thousands of candidates, really very smart candidates, but also against ChatGPT. And I like your point about depth of thinking. And I think that's what ChatGPT is missing, depth of thinking. That's probably the key of your success, to be smarter than ChatGPT. Yeah, that was super, super cool. So tell me, why do you reject candidates and what should they improve to pass interview? What the main reasons for rejections?
What are the main rejection reasons? So I think this is kind of it depends on the different roles, right? I challenge a lot of companies, right? And this has been like something that if I'm advising companies, I will work to really rewrite the job description as well. But I think my problem with the hiring process is that we expect candidates to be unique, but the job descriptions are not unique. PMs. And then that's been something that has been, like every time I've hired, every time I've been a product leader, even as a company, if I was hiring PMs for my own company, I would actually sit down and I would rewrite. At least there would be big parts that I would rewrite. Sometimes it wasn't possible, right? Like it takes a lot of time to be doing this, but I made it a point that based on what we were facing in the company, there are certain aptitudes and competencies that I would need as a leader that is missing in my team that I would need to get complemented, right? It's not just about getting another bum in the seat. It's not about, oh, we need another PM who can basically launch this feature. No, it's not about that. There is a certain competency skill that is missing. Yes, sometimes it can be about the volume of work and you need people in order to match the size of your engineering team, right? Like maybe the scope of the problem is so big that you have to divide up your pod into two, and so it might make more sense to have two PMs in that way. But I've tried to do this, and this is something that I coach a lot of companies and advise a lot of companies when we're doing it. But let's just not go there for now. But in terms of, I think, where are major rejections happening is that because job descriptions are so generic, it becomes really hard for a candidate to know, well, what is really the company trying to hire for, right? Like, what are the aptitudes, the competencies? And competencies are skills, aptitudes, and experiences. It's not just enough to, be like, yeah, I, of course, work with stakeholders. I'm great at influencing. I've led lots of different initiatives. Yes, I've shipped these type of features. Yes, I've launched features. Yes, I've worked with engineering team. This is what I think a lot of candidates are kind of thinking. But on the other hand, if there are certain skill gaps and competencies missing that I know as a company, it becomes an easy thing for me to say, okay, no, let's kind of move on to the next one. Because right now in this market, unfortunately, we know it's an employer market, right? It is going to change, right? Everything that goes down goes up, and everything that goes up goes down. That's the cycle of life. That's the circle of life and circle of the world. So I think given that you have so many different candidates, that you can be picky, you can be choosy. So that's the unfortunate times from a candidate perspective that we are living in. So when you're scanning, if something doesn't stand out to say, yeah, this is going to be a great competency add in my team, I just move on, right? So that's one. And I know that from a candidate perspective, it becomes really hard to know that, but you can do a little bit of a detective work to figure some piece of thing out, and we can talk about it at a later point. So the other thing is, if the resume is so generic that I cannot even distinguish between one and the other, remember, the first time I'm barely spending 20, 30 seconds. And so, even like right now, I've got a stack of like 45, 50 resumes for a company that I'm advising. I was looking at the resumes this morning. I went by like maybe 20, 25. If I didn't see the name of the candidate, which I try to kind of redact when I'm looking at, just so that my own biases don't come in, I could not tell you the difference between one or, all those 25 resumes, because they look so identical. Most candidates today know they have to have bullet points. Most candidates know they have to have a strong action verb. Most candidates know they have to throw in a number. And so how do you distinguish? So there has to be something bigger than your resume, right? Typos. I cannot tell you how many times there are typos. I'll tell you something which was very interesting that happened last week. I was reviewing someone's resume, the LinkedIn. I clicked on it, right? So I was just reviewing the resume on my computer. So I clicked on it on the LinkedIn. That LinkedIn took me to another candidate's profile. So there was a typo on the LinkedIn.
Oh no, such a fail. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think she failed. I mean, that's a small thing, but yes, it kind of shows, right? The attention to detail. Yeah. No, we still kind of called that candidate in, but I'm just saying someone else might not have had, right? I think typos are important. I think overcomplicated resume is another one. Like if you think about it, the recruiter is going through resumes very quickly, right? Like hundreds. And suddenly you start seeing 2-column, 3-column, whole bunch of colors. There's a cognitive overload. Suddenly I need to stop and I need to kind of think like, okay, what is this now? Right? And reset. Sometimes the company might not be very forgiving in that way. They'll be like, okay, too much work. Let's just move on to the next one, right? Keep it boring, keep it simple. I think that is my advice. Like, I think overcomplicated, colorful, whole bunch of stuff kind of going in there, no, doesn't help. That's just on the resume bit. I think the third thing is, I think referrals are very important. Given that it takes not only a long time to hire PMs, good PM, it also takes a long time to onboard and get them up and running, where they can be independent workers, where they can start making bigger and bigger decisions on their own, right? It takes a long time. Once you've joined a company recently, you know that initial period, like it is one of those hardest roles to kind of get onboarded. You not only have to understand how product is done at that company, you have to understand how deployment is done in engineering. You have to understand what's happening in success. You have to understand how do we sell. You have to understand business, competitors, industry. It takes a lot. And so so I think as companies, the risk averseness is very low. Like, you want to hire people that you feel like, yes, that they will be the right decision, and they are going to be the right candidate given where we are. And maybe they're going to be able to get onboarded and run quickly, very fast. So there is a particular competency that I've always looked for, and I also see a lot of hiring managers looking for, and that is called high agency, right? As
what is that?
High agency would be, you are resourceful. You are not waiting for someone to give you everything in order to move ahead. It's a very ambiguous role. There are ambiguous problems you have to solve. You have to figure it out, even if you don't have all the information. And we also can't be blaming situation, environment, and others when something goes wrong. We have to take that ownership, and we have to figure it out beforehand, how we can avoid a lot of those things. And it's a very important competency as a PM. High agency, are you able to demonstrate that in the interview process? So then the answering, the depth or the lack of becomes very, very, very important to figure out during interviews. And that is, again, one of the biggest reasons why a lot of companies will be rejecting. I think the other thing is fibbing. So, we've all stretched our experiences to some extent. But I think I think it's very easy for hiring managers and recruiters to identify those fibs very quickly. They're interviewing thousands of candidates. For me, it doesn't take me even more than 5 minutes to figure out when I'm having a conversation with a candidate to know where things don't align and they don't match. So I think that is really, and that hurts your credibility. It may not be just for that company, but it may be for future companies as well. People talk. So I think that is really important to note. I'm not trying to scare candidates. I'm just trying to say, what's happening. I had an instance where I didn't get through the final round many years ago at a company. The final round, like after everything was done, there was one more round that came up. And this time it was with one very senior investor at that company, who was very much involved hands-on with all of the operations at the company. And I didn't do well. The investor was looking for certain things, and I wasn't able to bring that on. So even though I cleared all the 7 rounds, the last round that just popped up as a surprise, which was not part of the interview process, I tanked that. But I did the interview well enough, but not to what that company needed. That investor and I kept in touch even after the rejection, even though I really hated what had happened. I was not happy, but we kept that relationship going. And years later, and we would meet casually, once a year or so. But in a few years, that investor connected me with an opportunity that wasn't even posted and made that personal intro. And I got hired. So I think it's really important, I think, to kind of keep that. I know we digress there a little bit. I think another reason why candidates might not get through or get rejection would be, I think it's that over reliance of framework. I think
Oh yeah.
product management product management, I think, how do I say this without getting into trouble? I think we've lost common sense about building products. We've codified it so much, right? Like if this is a problem, you got to use this framework. If you're having problem with this stakeholder, like let's map all of the stakeholders in a 2x2 grid. How many times, like when you run into this problem where let's say you're so close to launching a feature and you have a very high senior stakeholder who's put their foot down, which PM immediately starts mapping them out in a 2x2 grid? No.
Or apply this RISE prioritization,
Yes,
impacts.
No, and I think, in a lot of interviews, what's happening is that, again, you ask a question and the candidates are trying to show that they know the jargon, they know the process, they know the frameworks. The hiring managers already know that. What they want to really see is, how did you make the decision? Were you strategic enough, right? Being strategic doesn't mean that you wrote a strategy document or you did a roadmap or you can do these things. Strategic thinking means, are you able to think clearly about something that's going to happen in the future based on incomplete data that you have now? And how are you making decisions at every point in the fork? Are you able to communicate that with clarity, right? Are you able to leave all of the scattered thoughts that you are having in your brain as you're mapping all of these things out, but you're communicating that so simply that it seems logical to the person who's listening to you? And I think these are some of the things that are really, really missing, right? And I would say those are becoming really hard. Again, the full stack experience becomes really like a big hindrance in moving candidates forward. If you're able to demonstrate that, you get brownie points. I think referrals are really important. If you're able to get referrals from people who are high enough, who are able to advocate for you and talk about your experience, as opposed to cold referrals. It's very easy to get cold referrals, but are your cold referrals able to influence decision-making to move you forward in the next round? That's a question you got to ask yourself. So you might be wasting time getting cold referrals.
Yeah. So that was super interesting. And I want to circle back a little bit because I like your point about the generic job description. And like the major reason why we have failed, just because the company do not know who are they hiring, like what the ideal candidate is.
I wouldn't say so much maybe that the company doesn't know what. I think they know what they're looking for. I think the job description, like I would say that is a byproduct. I am pretty confident that candidates know what kind of a PM they want to bring in. But unfortunately, I think the candidates are not familiar with what is it really that the companies are looking for.
So, but the companies just do not display these preferences in the job description in a proper way.
Because the job descriptions are pretty generic. Yes.
Generic. Yeah. That's why the candidate applies. The resume might look really interesting, but when they start interviewing the candidate, they realize that no, that's not like our unicorn that we are looking for. And it's actually wasting of time from the boss side. They're wasting of their own time. It's waste of time on the candidates. It's like from the candidate's perspective, it's even worse because they're rejected like again and again and discouraged and they just thinking that, oh, it's something about me, something wrong with me. But no, it's not wrong with you. It's like the process is like kind of broken.
We all know this, right? The hiring process is broken. And you got to do what you can control, right? As a candidate. I always tell that because yes, there is time for venting. I have thrashed pillows and I have yelled after interviews and after rejections. I used to have a folder where I would put all of the rejections, at least the ones that I've received, because many times I don't even receive a rejection, right? It's just like you don't hear back. But I used to have this folder many years ago and it went to like close to $5,000. And it was so detrimental for me. And at one point, I think one of my mentors told me, like, it is hurting your confidence. Like, you should just delete that folder. Like, you cannot be thinking about the rejections. Think about how many times you got on the spot offer, how many times, you've gone through. But, you have to control the controllable. He said, once you become a hiring manager, change the hiring process in your company. And I think that's what I did, right? Because as a candidate, yes, of course, I'm angry. I can vent, I can complain, but I cannot change that. I can only do things that are my control. What part of the process is the problem? Is it my missing skills? Is it missing experience? Is it resume? Is it interview process? Is it doing well in the job? Let me fix that, whatever I can, and fix it in a strategic way so that I can get the biggest bang for the buck. I'm not kind of, thinking I'm doing a lot of things, but I'm still stuck in that same place, which is something that I see in so much, right? Candidates are trying like 2 years, 3 years. They're like in this rut and they're thinking they're doing a lot, but you're not doing the right thing. Because if you don't understand that process, where the problem is, which part of the flow the problem is, and your biggest challenge, and you're solving those other things, then you're not addressing the right problem, right? So for people like who are trying to transition into product, one of the biggest hurdles here is, how do you demonstrate you've done the PM job before? Right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Let's probably pause, because I want to close this topic. I mean, like, because you mentioned about generic job description, you need to be a detective, and you promised to give a hint how to be a detective. Let's talk about it.
You remember that? Yes,
I wrote down everything you said. Yeah.
So Anna, this is something that my mentor told me very early on in my career, and I had the hardest time trying to unpack, what does being a detective mean? Because yes, I love playing Clue. I still play. I used to play it as a kid, whatever that version of Clue existed back in the day, so many years ago. And now often in our family, we play this with our 9-year-old. Right? You watch all these detective shows, but what does it mean like in a job search? Later on, I kind of realized that as a PM, one of the most underrated skills is also being a detective. You have to be a detective when you're trying to figure out the problem. You have to be a detective when you're trying to figure out the power structures of the company as well. Things that are said, but maybe not said, or said in a different way. We won't go there right now, but you have to be detective. But now in a job search, you have to be a detective too, which means, how can you get some insights of what is the product management culture in the company, as an example, right? Job description only tells you a standard thing of like, what is this role, right? What is a typical PM role? Great. But how does product management get done? Where are the challenges? What are some of the roadblocks or the headbutting that happens between PM function and some of the other functions? How can you find that out, right? And so something that I've done religiously, I think from many, many, many years personally, is I think just having these very casual conversations. So for example, have a conversation with an ex-employee if you're applying somewhere. Now, you have to be very, very pragmatic when you're having these type of conversations, because as humans, we all have biases. Existing employees will have biases. Past employees will have biases. And so if you're going to take everything literally, you are going to be making some very bad decisions, right? Because what worked with them and their context and their situation is very different. But these would be data points for you. And then you separate the signal from the noise, very much like being a PM, right? On the job. That's what you do. So in the job search as well, you can reach out to past employees. Again, you have to have these, like, you have to really invest in growing your relationship in the industry to be asking for favors and things like that. And sometimes cold reaching also helps. Like I do a lot of cold outreach, and sometimes, most of the times it works, sometimes it doesn't. So past employees is an example. Looking at the leader who heads up product at that company and looking at their background. So, product managers can report to a product leader who can come from a lot of different backgrounds, right? Sometimes product management reports to tech, sometimes product management reports to marketing, sometimes product management reports to product, sometimes product management reports to directly CEO. So who is that leader who's driving that, who has the seat in the exec room, and how is their product philosophy? It can radically change how product management is performed at that company. And so that will start giving you some sense of a lot of different things, right? And then you can ask yourself, well, is this going to be a fit? Is this, something that's going to work? Is this something that I need right now? So that, I think that is one piece. And then how do you ask questions, right? A lot of times I think, as candidates, you can ask questions. You should be asking questions. But again, are you showing that depth of thinking? Are you asking questions that are easily Googled? Or are you asking, and I use this phrase, and I know this is not a proper English phrase, but are you asking non-Googleable questions? Right? What are you really trying to find out? So for example, if you're trying to find out, well, am I going to get fired? If I'm interviewing, let's say I get a job, but am I going to get fired because this company has been firing? How do you ask that question in a very tactful way? What is it that you're really trying to find out? Right? Because there are no guarantees. Yes, anyone can be fired.
Yeah.
I mean, the CEO of OpenAI got fired. We're not going to go there. It can happen to anyone. So it's not the guarantee that you're looking for, but what is
it's
it?
It's such a weird question. Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm gonna ask that. I've never asked that. I usually ask something about, as you mentioned, non-Googleable, that you cannot find on the internet, but something like interesting for me, like about challenges in the team and the company. I don't know. Maybe you can give some examples of good questions. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'll give you one. One of my favorite questions that I've typically asked, because I think for me, I've worked for some great bosses. I've also worked for some not so good, and some that we don't want to talk about today. I don't want to give my energy thinking about those and all those triggers coming up, even to this date.
No.
Right. But I think, so for me, really trying to understand the style of the person I'm going to be reporting to, or my skip level, has been really, really important. So one question, if my rapport during the interview is going well, right, and we've kind of developed that, this is a question that in some shape or capacity I'm going to try to find. And essentially what I'm trying to understand from this person is how do you work on your best day and how do you work on your worst day? I want to see both sides, right? I think we are awesome folks when everything is going right, but even the best human being can show a very dark side when things are not going well for them, right? Guilty as charged here. And I've seen that happen, as an employee. And I want to know, how is that coping thing? Is that in me, or is that going to be too much? So that would be like some question, a possible question that I might ask. I literally don't ask questions about what would you do, because we know from human psychology that as humans, we are horrible in saying what we are going to do. If we are asked about something that we're going to do something in the future, we will typically give a politically right answer, the good answer. But that's not the
guarantee. Ask about past, yeah?
Ask about past. So how have you dealt with XYZ, right? And so I think those, and so again, back to that detective nature, like really spending time to, again, figure out like, what is it that you're trying to retrace your path back, and then figure out what questions you might ask so that you can figure out what your next path is. Let's say you've applied for a job. You don't know who you need to reach out to in order to, do a little bit of networking behind the scenes. Can you make smart guesses? Looking at the job on LinkedIn, the company on LinkedIn, who might potentially be the hiring manager or the recruiter? How can you make those smart guesses? That needs a little bit of detective work. So again, how much energy you're going to spend on each of those jobs is going to depend on how much you really want to get in that particular company or that role, or work for that person. Sometimes, I've done that. I didn't care for the title of the company, but I really wanted to work with that person under him or her, because I knew that I would be able to learn and unlearn. So yeah, those would be some examples of detective skills.
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you so much. Let's go back to the transition into PM, because we talk a lot about experienced product manager, but what's going on with junior product manager, associate, or like people who want to transit into product manager and start their career nowadays? What's their challenges and mistakes?
Yeah. So I think one challenge, or one, I wouldn't say a mistake in this one, but one challenge is, I think, this mindset, and that could be just, I think, what we're seeing in the market too, right? There is that perceived notion of what a product manager looks like and what that product manager has done. So, a lot of people don't come from a technical background, as an example, or a lot of people may not have worked in the Mengs and the Fangs, or whatever the next acronym tomorrow it's going to turn out to be, right? Or maybe you haven't gone to a very top tier university, right? And so typically the question that's going to happen on a regular basis, on a daily basis, that I get messages would be, oh, I come from this background, marketing, or I've been a teacher, I've been a nurse, or, I have done social work, or, I've been doing sales, or whatever, X. Do you think I can make the transition? And I think one thing to know is that product management is that one field that you don't have to go to school for to become a PM. That's one. And you need to have that different perspective to think about the problem. It is one of those roles where, again, this is something that my mentor told me years ago, and it radically shifted how I went about with my career, is Bosky, become a T-shaped and eventually a cross-shaped. Never become an I-shaped, right? Or never become someone who basically doesn't, like shapeless. And by that, what I mean is that you have to be good in something, but then you have to know enough about a lot of different things in the business to be able to really rise up in the career. And that's something that I was talking about before too, with the full stack skills. So you can be a PM from any background if you have the right aptitude and you really, really are a fit for that role. Right? It doesn't matter what you have done before. So I have seen, like in PM Dojo, we get people who have done, their ultrasound lab technicians to teachers, nurses, engineers, salespeople, social media people, social work, like you name it. They are product managers and very successful. Some of them are actually now hiring and they've gotten promotions in 2 years, right? Many of them are group product managers now. So that is one. I think really believing that, yes, I can make that transition happen. I have to figure out what I have and what I don't have. And I have to really understand what the market needs right now, and then figure out how I can close that gap as soon as possible, right? Or bring it as close to possible. You'll never be able to close the gap because the industry is moving so fast. But how can I be very strategic about closing that gap? So that's one, I think, mindset shift that people need to make. Because if you are asking yourself and doubting yourself, then it just kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I think the second thing is that, that every company is looking for that depth of thinking and that actual experience, even for junior roles. Mm-hmm. And if you've never done PM work before, how do you show that? So you could spend thousands of dollars doing all kinds of courses for 5 years. You will never be able to fill that gap. So you have to, again, solve the right problem. If you don't have experience, then get that experience, from volunteering to joining PM Dojo to building something. Like, figure out how you're going to get that experience. And that experience is not just, oh, I'm going to work on a side project, right? It's not about that. You have to be able to show relatable experience, right? You have to be able to kind of show, okay, I was able to think like a PM. I was able to do work like a PM. I was able to solve those team dynamic issues, because there is a big portion of the time as PMs we spend with people and people problems. It's less of a process problem, less of a tool problem. It's people problems. So I think that, and I think, how are you going to stand out? As you rise up in the career, there are fewer roles and fewer candidates, but down at the bottom in the junior roles, there's so many, right? Like, university graduates are coming, they're looking. Everyone wants to become a PM, right? Every second person wants to become a PM. And so again, how are you going to stand out? What is your personal moat that you have? And I can guarantee you everyone has that. You continue to keep on, of course, need to hone it over the years. But what is it that you are going to differentiate yourself. Again, as a PM, right? You launch a product, it's a very crowded marketplace. How are you going to differentiate yourself? How are you going to talk about it yourself, right? And so I think that becomes really, really important, and for people who are trying to get into product, like we see a lot of folks, I think, getting into product roles. I think you also have to think about title agnostic. I am, we've seen this before. This is my prediction, or this is what I believe, that the work of product management is going to eventually become title agnostic. It's going to end up becoming the job to be done. And it can come in lots of different titles. Like the other day, I was talking with a company, and they are hiring an intrapreneur, which is essentially what a PM does. I see innovation managers a lot that companies are thinking, because at the end of the day, you are innovating and helping the companies innovate. So I think look beyond the title, look at the actual work, the job to be done, and then kind of go. I think a lot of people believe they are going to do a course or a program and are going to become a PM. No, I don't think this field is for everyone. Not to kind of say that you're not good enough, but you have to really love the high. But with that high, there are a lot more lows. There are a lot of other unglorified aspects of this field, it, Anna, that kind of makes you question, am I in the right field? I've certainly had that. Is it really worth it? Should I just kind of move into something else? It's an extremely, extremely hard role. So think about, whether you really want to do it. There is lots of benefits and perks that comes out of it. Can accelerate your career big time. But don't just believe naively that you will do a program or a course and magically you're going to become, or you're going to get a PM resume and magically you could find yourself to be super unhappy in that role. And that's fine. And that's fine. That is life. And there are pivots that happen. It's an experiment in your career.
Yeah, we talk about transition into product management. We need another episode, transition from product management, right? Yes. I think that's going to be a super interesting episode, because I've been in product management for 10 years and I'm always thinking about, okay, Anna, what's your next step? I launched my own company already. I've already coached. I've already mentor. I'm like doing, what else I can do? Yeah, that's like super interesting.
It's my favorite topic, like transitioning out.
Yes, yeah. We should record another episode. So coming back to transition into product management and junior PMs. So who are in the worst position right now? Senior, or middle PMs who are looking for a job, or junior? Because I think that junior PMs wants to start their career, but the market is overwhelmed with experienced product managers. But on the other hand, junior PMs can take lower salary and also can compete on the salary level with experienced PMs. So what's the situation for junior PMs right now?
Yeah, so I think it depends on how are we defining junior PM. So, for example, a lot of the folks who are coming out of university, recent grads, a lot of big tech companies do have RPMs and APM positions. It's highly competitive. It's always been very competitive. And again, in this market, the number of those roles have decreased. Like this is what we're seeing, right? Like if a company was hiring, let's say 20, and just as an example, in this market, maybe it's half, maybe it's 1/3, right? Because everyone is, I think, in the tech industry at large, I think companies are beginning to rethink about the viability and sustainability, right? I think for the first time in many, many, many years, right? Especially in the dearth of VC funding and external funding and just the market and interest rate. So yes, there are fewer roles, but for someone who is very early in their career, 1-2 years, you have to kind of start thinking about from that pool, APM, RPM. If maybe you have done product management for maybe 2-3 years, yes, you may be able to apply for some of those APM roles, but you also got to ask yourself, well, do I stand a good chance for APM roles, or should I try for PM roles? So I think the first thing is like you have to kind of ask yourself and figure out what is the right role to apply and the right level to apply. Right. So yes, the market has dwindled. There are fewer roles. That is a fact. But if you're applying to the wrong level, then you're going to run into problem. It's not always about, I think yes, you now have some of the more experienced PMs applying for, let's say, PM roles, because also I think the levels are flattening. We're seeing that in a lot of different companies, right? The levels are kind of, I think, if you were, let's say, at a director level, you might have to, in the market now, start looking for GPM levels. And we also know that this is a known fact even before the recession started, that the PM leveling is not consistent across every company.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The Mangs and Fangs, let's just say Mangs right now, have certain levels, but those levels don't correspond with all the other companies, right? There are some very big companies who specifically like to have flatter PM orgs, right? And so you can just map that. And so it's really, again, I think something that I always tell people, and I'll answer your question, is when you think about it, yes, titles are important. I have chased that, for years. But look at the scope of work and look at the level of decision making, the level of impact that should kind of give you. And of course, the compensation is going to correspond to that. Yes, the compensation and the salaries are also decreasing a little bit, right? So that's a known fact. So I think to answer your question, who is facing the biggest problem? I think it's two, right? The two ends of the spectrum is, I think, where everyone is facing challenging times. But I think the two ends of the spectrum is, I think, where I'm seeing it is getting harder and harder, because at the bottom end, where you have way too many candidates, fewer roles, but in the top, you have very fewer roles. Like, how many companies are going to be, like, how many CPO roles are going to be there? How many VP level roles are going to be there? How many director level roles? But then you have a lot of mid-career folks or senior-ish enough PMs who are looking to climb up in the ladder. So then what happens? So I would say the two sides, and then of course you have the middle, which kind of gets pushed from both ends. But I think the two sides of the spectrum are kind of facing, in my opinion, in my point of view, I think the biggest pain point right now.
Okay, and how do you see the future of product management in 2024?
From a hiring job search standpoint, or as a field standpoint?
From the hiring, but from the field as well is super interesting. Okay. So yeah, but because absolutely. We are talking about like hiring, product management, and interview processes, job search, let's start from that side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from a hiring standpoint, I'm definitely seeing an uptick on the jobs coming up, hiring coming up. But I think that I don't like that word hidden job market, because it feels like, oh my God, like you have to be part of some exclusive club to know that hidden jobs. I think there are lots of companies hiring and they don't publish it, but they start these cold kind of like, so I get so many messages from all these hiring managers, I'm going to be hiring in like Q1, Q2. Do you know anyone? I'd love to kind of start these informal conversations. And so I think that is happening a lot. In terms of, I think, from a candidate perspective, really knowing how to stand out, applying for the right roles, knowing where you are and what the market requires at this point in time. So not just chasing behind the latest shiny object technology. So I love AI, everything from an AI potential, but don't just chase becoming an AI product manager. Because at the end of the day, AI is a technology and an enabler. You're still a product manager. Yes, you'll have to do your job differently, right? But at the end of the day, like, figure out where you're going to be filling those gaps and what are those right gaps that you need to fill. Like, be very mindful, treat your career like a business where, yes, you do take some risky bets, but you're also taking the right bets and investing in your career so that you are thinking 2-3 years ahead to figure out what might be happening, right? So I think upskilling is going to be really important in terms of, I think, from a candidate standpoint, to just stand out. Learning how to tell your story is going to be super important, because over the last, I think, couple of years since pandemic, people have had career breaks. There have been multiple layoffs. A lot of people have had multiple layoffs. How are you going to communicate that? How are you going to tell that story? What are you going to tell truthfully, but how are you going to say it? And how are you going to own that? Right? It's going to be really important from a job search standpoint. A lot of people that I'm coaching, they'll be like, well, should I tell them that I got laid off twice? I'm like, when do you want to tell them? What question are you going to answering? Is that the highlight? Like, do you think that your elevator pitch needs to have all of the things that wrongfully, rightfully have happened to you? Like, you have to showcase your accomplishments rather than all of these other blips that have happened, right? So how do you own that story and tell that? I think how do you start building those relationships is going to be different in the coming year. Over the pandemic, a lot of stuff was happening virtually. People are now starting to come out. There's a lot more of these IRL and face-to-face sessions. But again, how do you balance those two and figure that piece out? How do you spend some time to really identify what you want to achieve, what kind of people you want to work, what works for you, what doesn't work for you? Are you, do you want to take some time to reset? Do you want to figure things out? Or, if you are really looking from a career standpoint, like, is product management the right? Do you want to maybe do something different and then come to it? I think that self-reflection is really important. And then, of course, I think being very smart at applying, because the number of people in the job market is still very, very high, and it's going to continue to be very high, even in 2024. So again, how can you be very strategic about how you can get hired? And then once you're hired, how do you ensure that you're building those credibility within the company? How can you make sure that you're getting advocates to talk about you? How are you ensuring that you're thinking about your career long-term and sowing those seeds so that you can rise up in your career, right? Whatever that rise up might look like for you, whether it is the type of projects or whether it's more visible, less visible projects. Maybe it is climbing up the ladder and getting higher roles, making more money, or doing different type of work. So I think that is something really important from a career standpoint. I'm happy to elaborate if you want on any of these things. And then I think from a field standpoint, we're already seeing this, but I think we're going to see more and more and more is, again, that T-shaped full stack skills, right? Because I don't see that companies are going to, again, build super large and hyper specialized PM teams. I think there is some merit to having that end-to-end ownership, because then you're able to see that end-to-end and again, being able to think from a commercial standpoint, right? Like, is this going to be the right thing for the business? Is this going to make us money? How much? Having those P&L ownership can be super empowering. I've always given P&L ownership to my PMs, even when I've presented roadmaps and things like that. I've always tied my product team's work back to the revenue of the company. Otherwise, it's very easy for the product teams to be considered a cost center, right? You have to align yourself with a profit center. And so I think having that commercial sense, again, how are you going to, fill that gap where you're able to show that full stack skills? I think that is something that I suspect we're going to start to see more. I think there's going to be a lot more of blurring of responsibilities between, problem discovery work and the solution discovery work. It's not going to be very clear-cut demarcation of like designers do X and PMs do Y. I think we're going to start to see PMs who have to step up and become comfortable in quickly validating an idea, back of the napkin drawing, doing some financial modeling. How do you kind of tell the story? And, even if you're not that senior, coming and presenting to very C-level folks. So I think that's something that we would see. And of course, with the advent of AI and Gen AI and all of that, a lot of the grunt work that PMs have been doing, you can now become very productive by leveraging AI in your work. So we already see this, like, like a prod pad, as an example. It's a product management tool. You don't have to spend hours and hours and hours writing your user stories in ProdPad, because ProdPad has your roadmap, your data, your customer insights. You can give it a few inputs, and based on all of the product information that it has for you and your company, it can start generating some draft user stories and acceptance criteria. You can start refining it. So I think a lot of that grunt work that PMs have done is going to be now leveraged with AI, so that you can now become more strategic, right?
That's what I really need to be like, to avoid, probably to reduce number of user stories I create and focus on more strategic stuff. Like that's captured by project manager to like create user stories, maybe to like just manage this backlog. But yeah, if we can dedicate it to AI, that would be super great.
I mean,
super
you can
helpful.
already do that, right, with ProdPad and all. I think it's really about leveling up as a PM. I think that is going to be big time in order to not just get hired, but I think to rise up. Interpersonal skills are going to become super important, because at the end of the day, even with AI and all, we still have to work with people, not robots.
Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, we run out of time. I really want to dig deeper in each point you mentioned and elaborate that you proposed, but yeah, we need another probably episode about that.
Okay.
But yeah, tell me about PM Dojo. You mentioned multiple times how you help people. Just maybe give me a few words, like who are your clients and how do you help them?
Absolutely. So PM Dojo helps career professionals transition into product management, as well as for existing PMs to get promoted. And we do it in a way where we train you, we teach you, we coach you to approach this in a very smart way so that you're doing it faster. So if you think about it, I'll just give some examples. So let's say you want to get into product management, right? You might have done, straight out of university, or you are an experienced professional. Now you're looking to make that career pivot. You can do courses, great. They're going to teach you theoretical stuff, which is awesome. You're going to look into case studies, great. But that's not going to give you experience. And so in PM Dojo, you get to work in cross-functional teams, just like what happens in the real world. And while you're learning, you actually work with the team to go all the way from ideation to launching a live product. You also learn strategy. You're getting involved in strategy, beta launches, North Star metrics, roadmap, you name it, everything. So at the end of 10 weeks, instead of wasting 2-3 hours or 2-3 years sometimes just trying to learn theory, you're right now getting the skills, full stack skills that we've been talking about for a long time, as well as real experience, together with mentorship, as well as career resources to make the transition happen. We have a 95% success rate, which is unheard of in this market.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
95% success rate means that for all the fellows who come in and join PM Dojo, 95% of the time, or 95% of the fellows actually, have been able to make that transition happen. And now they are getting promoted as well. So it's been, again, it actually solves the real problem this industry and this market is having. So that is for folks who are looking to transition into product. And then we also have coaching programs. That is something that I lead. So this is for existing PMs who want to level up and get promoted and rise up. We also have job search and interview coaching, and quite a few of those programs. I'm sure we can share the link out there. And it's an experiential coaching. Everything is learned by doing. So again, when I'm coaching, it's, yes, I can be your advocate and cheerleader, but a lot of the work that we do, it's all learned by doing, so that you are building that muscle to actually excel. And again, we've seen tremendous results out there. So that's what happens in PM Dojo, both for career transitioners as well as for folks who are already existing PMs. Other than that, and we share tons of resources on LinkedIn as well as our blogs and things like that.
Yeah. Subscribe to Bosky's LinkedIn. I will leave her contact information at the description to this video. So my last question, what else you can recommend to product managers who are looking for a job right now?
What else? I think give yourself a little bit of grace. I think that is something that is really important. I think I'd love to say that. A lot of times it might not be you, so stop beating yourself. But at the same time, I think every time you are applying or you end up with an interview, take some time to reflect and jot down what you did well and what could you have done better or differently. I think it's really important. I think even as a PM, it's a very introspective role. It needs that humility and introspection to actually become a great product manager. And so I think, again, for me, you have to apply those same mindsets even in your job search, right? Because I think doing that reflection is important, because then you might remember, maybe that question I didn't go deep enough. And so then that gives you a signal for what you can do better next time. So I think that is there. The other thing is, I think, don't just go, we all want to work for these marquee companies. I'm guilty as well of that. I think it's very, you too. Yeah. I mean, everyone, right? There are reasons. But we also have to be, I think, while we're being idealistic, I think it's really important to be pragmatic. Given what is happening in the tech industry, it's very important to know what's happening in the market. You know that what has been happening with a lot of big tech, yes, there are a lot of perks, but ask yourself, is this going to be the best thing for me right now? Is there another milestone or a stepping stone that I can get into? And eventually, maybe I'm going to get into big tech. But ask yourself, is this the right thing? Don't follow that thing blindly. And I'm not saying that people are doing that, but I am just speaking from my own experience. And I also am speaking from, when I'm coaching people. Don't lose that pragmatism, because a lot of common sense approaches of how you can think about in your job search, we're going to miss those if we're going to be so gung-ho that I want to get into Mangs right now. So always put that market perspective and figure out, because maybe you've just had a little one. I'm just kind of giving an example. Ask yourself, would you actually do well in that kind of an environment? So figure out, I think, what that right fit for you is. I think imposter syndrome is very, very real. We all have it. I haven't met a single good human being, even successful, very successful people, but good people who don't have imposter syndrome. And I'm going to share something that I often share when I'm invited to talks and conferences and things like that. And this comes from one of my managers many years ago, because I do have a lot of self-doubt. Multiple times in a day, I'm going to have it. I'm going to question myself a lot of the times. I think both professionally as well as personally, as a mom as well. I'm very imperfect. So
and I think it's healthy. Yeah, it's healthy to ask
healthy.
yourself.
It's absolutely healthy.
I think it's actually weird not to ask. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I think what he told me years ago, and it took me again a long time to fully understand the meaning of those wise words, is it's normal. It's just a feeling. But a lot of times, I think when we're feeling that, our body reacts very similarly when we are excited and when we are nervous. So you got to do that reframing in your mind and telling yourself, am I excited? Maybe I'm feeling this because I'm excited because there's something new. Or maybe I'm excited because I'm trying to kind of conquer this thing that is, I have no idea, or maybe I'm trying and it's such a tough problem and a tough problem to crack that it is going to need me to think differently. So yes, just be mindful that our body reacts very similarly when we are excited as well as we are nervous. So that is something important to note. And the second thing that he mentioned to me is the line on the two sides of imposter syndrome is very, very thin. And Bosky, you have to decide whether you want to be on this side of the imposter syndrome where you question yourself, right? And maybe you are, your confidence is low, but you're questioning yourself, am I good enough? Or you want to be on this side of the imposter syndrome where you're so confident that confidence has lost all of its humility, and you've become a cocky jerk that no one wants to work with. So you ask yourself which side of the line you want to be. And you might realize that having a little bit of self-doubt is a lot better than being a cocky jerk.
Okay,
That no one
definitely. 100% agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that has become really, like, I remember that every single time, and I'm going to ask myself that thing a lot of the times, right? Like, which side of the line? And so I think that has become a game changer. And if anyone is interested in imposter syndrome, there is this 3-minute talk from the co-founder of Atlassian, where I used to work at TED, and it's called Imposter Syndrome. It's by Mike Cannon-Brookes. It's one of the most amazing talks on imposter syndrome that we don't get to hear. But it is something that I bookmark and I listen often, even to this day, to kind of just, I think, reframe a few things in my head, right? It's not possible a lot of times to push the eject button. You have to keep the conversation going. And that's what he says. And how do you kind of use it as a force for good versus the other? So I think that'll be my thing, like manage that, cope, figure out what your coping mechanism is with rejections and with imposter syndrome and self-doubt. It's going to happen. It happens with everyone. Another tip would be stop comparing yourself with how many hours someone else is putting on their job search. So I hear this a lot. Someone else is doing 40 hours and I'm just putting 5 hours. So of course I'm going to get rejections. It doesn't matter. This is not cracking of an exam. It doesn't matter if the other person is doing 200 case studies and you've only done 2. But if you've done those 2 really well, where you've been able to show that deep thinking, it's going to be a lot better than someone who's doing 200 and literally regurgitating frameworks. So please don't compare yourself. Find your tribe. Find your tribe. You don't have to do this alone. It's very, very important to find the right tribe. You need people that you can vent to, but you also need people who are going to show you a different perspective. Because if you're going to just be with the people that, you can vent with, you're not going to see the possibility. So I'm going to pause there. And hopefully this kind of helped.
That's super helpful. And yeah, so you probably notice me typing all the time. It means that there are so many good thoughts and like ideas and insights that I cannot stop typing. Yeah. So if I'm typing, it's a good sign about super insightful conversation. And I'll definitely attach the video of co-founder of Atlassian about imposter syndrome to this video in the description so you can watch it. I'll definitely go right now and watch this video. So thank you so much, Bosky. That was super exciting. It's super amazing conversation. Please give us a thumbs up if you like this video. I bet so many people will be benefit from that. So, and yeah, I hope this video will help you to start your career as a product manager and have transition to product management in 2024, or find amazing job offer very soon. There are a lot of insightful tips for you guys. Thank you so much, Bosky. Again, I will leave all the information about PM Dojo and also Bosky contact information in the description to this video. If you need to improve your resume, LinkedIn profile, or prepare for the interviews with American company, if you're an immigrant like me, please visit my website ananaumova.com to schedule a call with me. I work with a lot of immigrants and I understand all their pain points. So give a thumbs up if you like this video, share this video with your friends, and or maybe in social media if you find it helpful, and of course subscribe to this channel so you do not miss any future video about job search in the US. Thank you, Bosky, again, and
so much.
Yeah, I hope we will meet soon on the next episode about transitioning from product management. I really like that. If you like this idea, please also comment to this video. I think that's going to be a great interview.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Loved it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.